Welcome back to the Oxygen Users Meetup at XMLPrague. We start the second part and the last this year of our meetup with a couple of presentations more on the publishing development and some of the add-ons that can be used with Oxygen. So, ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Julien Lacour.
Hello everyone. So as George said, my name is Julien. I'm a senior software developer in the Oxygen publishing team, and I'm also the only French member of the Oxygen company. And today, I will show you how to use a combination of CSS and XPath to produce high-quality PDF outputs. The agenda of this presentation will start with the presentation of how we can use and what are the benefits of XPath in CSS rules using the really famous Oxy XPath function. Then we will take a small look at two non-standard pseudo elements that you can use within Oxygen, which are called before and after n. And after, we will take a look at some small production examples and use cases, including the display of metadata, the addition of customized text, and how to add or remove watermark. And for these examples, I will use data, but you can translate these examples into other XML types. So as an introduction, we will see the power of XPath. So maybe some of you already knows what XPath is. It's a language that allows you to select and to address any location within an XML document. Of course, it supports the creation of variables, loops, or end conditions. And all the result of each query can be obviously post-processed using any kind of functions. The advantage of using XPath in CSS is that using the so-called Oxy XPath function, you can, in combination with the XPath contents function and matching over the data classes, you can select each element of the structure, and you can apply or display the result of these queries. You just have to know that in the data use case, as you can see, the transformation goes by an intermediary steps, which is HTML5 document. So this is why we recommend as best practice to match using the classes, the data classes, because as you can already see here, this is how the intermediary HTML5 file looks, and you can see that the original elements from data are changed into HTML5 compatible elements, so you cannot, or it's a little more difficult to match using the elements. So now a small parenthesis on those two pseudo elements that are Oxygen custom pseudo elements, but in my opinion they should also be in the CSS standards, which are called before and after n.
Actually, there was a CSS draft that we sent it to them, and that's why we implemented these pseudo elements.
But somehow they
we not just invented them ourselves. But for some reason it was
they canceled the draft version for these ones, but I don't really know, because I found these I found these elements really useful. The advantages of these two pseudo elements is that they can allow you to add extra levels of static content. The simple rule that is used for these elements is that the higher the level you set as the end value, the bigger will be the distance between the original element and the pseudo element. And of course, if you set the value to 1, it corresponds to the classic standard before and after pseudo elements. Sorry.
What do you mean by distance?
It means that if you have more elements applying on the same element, the order on which those elements will apply will go from the higher value to the lower value.
Okay, so that allows me to arrange.
Yeah, exactly. You can put multiple layers, and they will apply from the higher to the lower. So, and of course, if you want exactly the details and some examples, anyway, I let a link to our documentation that give even more examples on how to use that. So now let's start with our first use case. So for example, if I want to add some metadata in the cover page, I will need to create additional blocks which are not included in the original data content. So for that, I will use my before and after n elements and a small XPath query that will get as the result the metadata I want to display. So if I go in Oxygen, you can see on the first lines that I already set a rule after the page title, which will be the name of the data map that I am using. And I just created, so the Oxy XPath function must be contained in the content CSS property. So I set this function there. And I simply add a small text before, then my query, which in this case will return the name of the author. So as I mentioned in the introduction, this content must be valid in the intermediary merged HTML file, which is generated in this case by the transformation from data to PDF using CSS. And I can easily verify that if I open Oxygen XPath builder. I can copy exactly as it is in the CSS the XPath that I'm using to obtain the result. And if I run the specific query, I will see that the results will show me exactly what corresponds in my data structure to the author, which I am in this case. And also, as I mentioned, if you look on the query, you have seen that I use the best practice that I recommend at the beginning. So I match not using the elements, as there are a lot of divs, but I prefer directly match on the data attributes that corresponds to what I want.
Another question.
Yeah.
Why are you addressing the text nodes and not just the element?
If I address the element, I will have the whole element in the output.
Yeah, we twisted a bit the XPath function because sometimes we needed, yeah, we had to do it for the XPath function. Sometimes we needed also the actual element itself with the tags, I think.
Yeah.
I advise people never to address the text node because you can end up with mistakes and unexpected behaviors whenever addressing the text nodes. You should address the element. But okay.
You can end up with unexpected stuff if you don't.
Yeah, in this case, I think the only difference was that if I don't address with the text function, I will have the whole node displayed in the final document. So I will have the div with the class and my content. So I'll not just have the...
Oh.
That was a use case, but I don't remember at which moment we had this. Also, if I so get back and take the second example I did in this presentation, you can see that the function, the Oxy XPath function, supports the creation of variables. So, for example, I can create a variable called last version. Same here, I can select the node directly. So I want the last node matching the version release and modification from my document. And from this node, I will just return a concatenated version containing the attributes I want to display, which are in this case the version, the release, and the modification. And if I go into the generated PDF, you will see that here is the result of the first query. And here you will see the result of the second query with the node here and the 3 attributes displayed. So some may ask, what if the query has multiple results? Maybe you want to process them, each of them, or post-process each of them. The Oxy XPath function also supports the for instruction, so you can create a loop to post-process this each nodes from the result. And also, as I did before, you can, as a preset of the loop, create a variable which will contain all the nodes you want to process, then enter each of them using the for loop. And this is so I just go back to Oxygen and show you the third example, which is exactly the demonstration of this loop. So I created once again a small variable which gets into my structure and will get all the revisions of my document. Every time another author or a reviewer modified the document and changed its the revision date, saying that it's the last version from the date of the revision. And for each of those revisions, I will simply display the date of the modification and the special symbol for the new line. So I will have displayed on more lines. And this is what you can see below. So in my document, I have two different, I have the original date, which I don't display. And I have two small versions, as it's seen on the current version, because it's 1.0.2. And I have two updates, which are displayed one after the other. So I processed each result separately.
Question?
Yeah?
What you're doing there, using flower expressions, is not XPath, it's XQuery.
Yeah, it's because you can, the Oxy XPath can support the X query. This is what I wanted after to see that for people who don't really know how to use those X query expressions. I added a link to the standard how to use flower X query expressions.
The name of the function is a bit misleading.
Yeah. It's Oxy XPath supporting also X query expressions. Yeah, could be easier to understand, but a little more complicated to use. Another use case that I can have is that I could want to display other information from the document metadata in the header or the footer of my PDF. And once again, this may be done using XPath queries. The only difference is that as I am outside of the document frame, so it's not inside the content, it's just around it, I will use what is called in the CSS page media the page margin boxes. Once again, there is a link showing the whole schema, what are all the page margin boxes available, and where there will be positioned into the content. In my example, I created a specific margin for all my type of pages, so front page, etc., to the chapter and the index. And I want to display in the bottom left part of my PDF a concatenation of the following elements, which is some pieces of static text, like the copyright and the all rights reserved text, and the informations, the copyright information that are already available in data, which are the copyright year and the person or the organization, in my case, that holds this copyright. And if I go to the PDF, you can see here that the result is in the bottom left part of the document, as indicated by the page margin box, and contains exactly the static text and the different informations that are gathered from the document.
Question?
Yeah.
How do you deal with translation in that case?
I have a small example for this just after. So as you already want to see, I can have a problem, yeah, if, for example, I have translation to made, because as those elements are not really part of the document itself, but are additional informations. Usually in CSS, when you want to create content which is changing depending on the language you are using in your document, you can use the pseudo class called lang, and the content will adapt to these different rules. In this case, as I'm outside of this frame, I have once again to use page margin box. And I have to get back to what in fact does the lang pseudo class, which is in fact making some conditions using the language, the XML lang or the lang attribute used in my document. And for example, here I want to display at the bottom right of my PDF the page name simply. So I want to display page if it's in English, or if in German I want the correct translation, etc., etc. And so this is what I've made in these examples. And I applied these rules only on the pages that are marked as chapters. So this is why it's not appearing on the front page. But if I go to a chapter page, and I'm in English for this example, so you can see that the conditions, even nested, works in the Oxy XPath function. And I have the correct text, which is the concatenation of the text page, and the counter, which numbers each page of my document. Another interesting thing that you can do with Oxy XPath is that you can control the display of an image, which, for example, can be a watermark over my document. For this, I will still use the page CSS at rule, and I use the default, the standard background properties from CSS. And I can condition the display for this watermark or its non-display, if I can say this like this, using another simple condition, checking if maybe an element is present on my document, saying it's a draft or it's not a draft, or it's the final version. In my example, so you can see it here in my CSS. So I defined the page, the global page for all the document. I said that the background image will check first if the document contains the approved element, the data approved element. If it's approved, so I don't have to display it. And if it's not, I mean it's maybe a draft version, and I will add the background image. And the other properties are just to make sure that how my image will render in the page. And if I go back to the PDF, so this is the version like without the draft text. And this is exactly the same document, but with the draft. So because I remove the element, and the image will automatically be rendered. So we have seen that there is quite a lot of advantages to using XPath in CSS. For me, the first point, which is nice in this case, is that my CSS style sheet become reusable, as I can use it for all my documents. For example, in the watermark case, I can use it in maybe 10 or thousands of different documents, and the watermark will display or not, depending on the content. So I don't have to create 10 or 20 style sheets, one for each document. It is interactive, as I can directly fetch informations from the source document and render them in the final document. And it's dynamic because the CSS style sheet, rather than be a single static frame that we apply over an element, I have something that, depending on the content you give to the CSS style sheet, you will have an output which will be different, which in my case, I think this is really nice and really compatible with the reusability of the style sheets. For people who want to go further on these points, I have a few links leading to our user guide, which contains other examples than today's examples, and also explain you how to write those XPath expressions and how to debug them in the case, which is what I did, for example, when I opened back this document and I simply try to fetch the element and to make sure that my queries are working correctly. And I want to thank you. And if you have other questions.
Yeah, you didn't tell us, but what you're using to create this PDF is, what's it called?
Oxygen PDF chemistry is the processor, our homemade processor, which converts XML or HTML to PDF using CSS.
Have you experimented with sidebars based on the revision attribute on topic? Or
Yeah, we have but it's not called. It's called change bars, I think you mean. Yeah. We support this, and we support this in different ways depending on the type of document you are using. For data, for example, there is an automatically conversion between what is reviewed, so what are deleted or inserted changes, and you will have an automatic change bar on the left side of the document. For the other types, you can create CSS rules using the pseudo element, I think it is change bar. You have a colon change bar, and you can create a change bar having its side, color, etc. And also the part which you want to display the document within, if it's right or left part.
You showed the XPath function as a CSS property value, but can you also use it as a CSS selector?
As a CSS?
Selector?
No.
But you have the has, column has.
Yeah, you can use the column has for this, yeah.
Support that as well.
Yeah. For usually we use this one, yeah. You have column has.
Initially it was the bang operator that allow you to check within the element some conditions, but then the CSS spec moved to using column has.
They would have no possibility to look what's following.
What? Sorry?
To check what's the following elements or something.
You can do this using the has element. So for example, you can match the topic and check if the topic contains a specific element using the colon has, and inside the colon has you have to indicate the child or the descendant element you want to match.
But only the
Not
descendants,
following
not the following
sequence.
elements.
Not following.
The following you have all the combinators are working in CSS. The plus, I think it's the plus combinator.
But you will match on the.
But you will match on the next one. And you cannot in CSS. You cannot match the previous element. Yeah.
Sometimes,
Yeah.
even if you match on the next element, you can use the before end thing to push some static content, and with XPath go back to the original element and put some content there. So there are some tricks.
Yeah.
But it's that's CSS.
Yeah, the CSS doesn't really like going before. There.
I'm still wondering how this works. So I would actually take the XML and take the CSS and generate some pixels LFO and use Apache FOB to produce a PDF. Because you said you have a homemade processor, I think it's very hard to create a homemade.
It's based on
yeah,
exactly
Oxygen.
going to XSLFO and using Apache FOP.
Oh,
Yeah, Oxygen PDF chemistry is based on FOP, but it has small differences or fixes that FOP does not have.
Are you running into performance issues with large documents?
I've tested on the user guides. We have some
2000 something.
Yeah, and we don't have really huge times, but I've never, no users complains about maybe having hours of processing, so I don't really know.
I think it's a good idea. Maybe you won't have any performance issues when mapping the XPath to the real XPath evaluation.
Well, on the XPath function, you can specify also whether you want that to be evaluated once or multiple times, or there's a parameter on the XPath function where you can specify, whether it should be always evaluated in CSS or only once, because those are used also during authoring time. So you can customize the user experience or the user interface for people that create XML content using the XPath function. The fact that you use it with chemistry is just that we inherit the same CSS engine from Oxygen.
Yeah.
But during authoring time, you can specify that you want that XPath to be executed once or all the time, depending on, sometimes that is just one value that you, or it doesn't matter, you need to refresh the document to get another value if you change something.
How is the tooling supported? So if I'm writing an XPath in the CSS file with an element that does not exist in the XML file, with Oxygen editor,
you can use the XPath builder to check the expressions, basically. So you have the original input XML and you can check your expressions with the XPath builder, then you can paste them into the CSS.
Yeah, this is what I shown at the beginning. Yeah, and usually, yeah, and even if you check the user guide, it explains maybe with other examples. But usually, we check this first on the document, then we just paste them, because if not, you have to run the whole transformation to see that in your PDF nothing is displayed. So it takes quite a long time.
And regarding internationalization support, there's also an extension function called I18N that you can use to provide a set of resources that basically provide from a key different values depending on the language. And then you can use that function to just provide a key, and that will resolve dynamically based on that resource file, like any
and you can also use the document function from XPath. You can directly select, for example, if you have the same attributes in the document and this, you can select from another document the text you want to display and just display it in the final document.
I think we are just in time.
Other questions? No? No? Perfect.
So thank you, Julien.